So, welcome to another show. Today we have Alan Cox, who is a mental health change maker and someone who's been through an experience himself. So, welcome to today's show, Alan.
Very happy to be here.
So, do you want to give people a bit of background then as to why you're an advocate for positive mental health and, as you said, a change maker in this space, really?
Yeah, I guess so as a bit of background, I've had previously had decades of experience with quite poor mental health. At times it's been quite severe, um, but really I went through a transformation myself, and as part of that journey, I really got to see that where most people are sitting with their mental health is still far away from where they really could be. I think that puts a lot of barriers to people's kind of not only their happiness but also their opportunities in life. Um, and in terms of the change making kind of thing, firstly, I want to help people see, that the change is possible wherever they're at. But I'd also really like to change the conversation around mental health, because whenever you hear the term mental health, it usually means that people usually interpret that as meaning a discussion around poor mental health. Whereas really everyone has mental health regardless of where it is, just like everyone has physical health. So yeah, I kind of like to change that conversation so it's there's far less stigma and it's far more normal to work on your mental well-being.
Yeah, I think there's a good analogy, isn't there, that you've made there in some respects. I would compare that to a car. It's like you don't have to wait for the car to break down to start repairing it. You can service the car before it breaks down, which will then stand them in good stead. So, why do you think you also mentioned the phrase people are far away from where they could be? What does that mean to you? Is it a case of being in a depressive state? Is it a case of being on in the wrong career? Is it a case of having financial obligations? Is it a case of maybe not getting out in nature enough? What does that mean to you specifically? Because I think for everyone, they have their own
Mm.
sort of niche definition, don't they, as to what that means. So for you, what does that mean specifically?
Yeah. So whatever label you use, whether you use the term mental health, mental well-being, or mental fitness, um, if you basically imagine a continuum between 1 and 10, where say 1 is as bad as you possibly can be and 10 is that you're more enlightened than the Dalai Lama or something, right? um, Around the 3 mark is where you transition from being mentally well to mentally unwell. So for example, if you thought that you was, say, a bit depressed or something, and you went to see a doctor, assuming it's a good doctor, um, if they did an assessment on you, they would maybe find that you're a 3.5 or a 4, and they would conclude from that that you don't need any medication. You're actually mentally well, and would probably say that you need to just do some lifestyle changes. You need to maybe pull back on working so hard or whatever. Um, but the thing is that there's a long way between 3.5 and say 9 or 10, right? Let's just talk about what say 8, 9, or 10 looks like, right? When you're up there, um, you have more optimism. You have a lot more self-confidence. You don't see failure as failure, and there's so many things. You're more creative, and you can solve problems easier, and you're healthier. The 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 sad reality, I guess, is that if you look at our population, most human beings, particularly in the Western world, are the bell curve is like peaks around 5.5, something like that. Most people are between, like, say, 4 and 6. So really, that's what I'm saying, is that, if you're in that range, 4, 5, 6, you are, in quotes, normal. You're okay. You're like most other people of your age, but there's a long way you can still go, and there's like a huge amount of reward and benefit that comes from being further up the curve.
Yeah, I mean the Stoic phrase that comes to mind is it's not what happens to you, it's how you view things that's important. Because you mentioned the pessimistic versus optimistic side of things. You mentioned the self-image, the failure not necessarily being failure. And I think that comes down to that phrase, isn't it? The Stoic phrase of it's not what happens, it's how you view things. Do you view yourself as someone who's like high status, someone who gets things done, someone who is sociable, someone who does achieve good things, someone who sees failure as part of the process as opposed to suppressing your self-image to an extent. You mentioned at the start of the chat that you've obviously been through this on a personal basis as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, if you could?
Yeah, so I had quite a traumatic and somewhat abusive childhood, right from a very early age. um, I guess I wasn't a planned baby, and looking back, that probably put a lot of pressure on my parents. At the time, there was a lot of stigma about having a child out of wedlock and that kind of thing. But that experience I had at a very early age, that's when you're forming your most important connections in your brain, right? And I formed some connections that basically said that I was not worthy. My parents didn't love me. All of that kind of stuff. The world is a bad place. Um, so yeah, I struggled to get through school. When I became an adult, and then you have the pressures of having a responsible job, having a mortgage. That's when the cracks really started opening up, and I went through decades of depression. Um, when I had some quite serious life events happen to me as well, and because of those, that really kind of sent me to a very, very low level. Probably down the one to two level. Um, yeah, multiple suicide attempts over the years, and thankfully they didn't work. um, and Yeah, the straw that broke the camel's back was when I nearly got killed in the Canterbury earthquakes here. And that ultimately led to me losing my business, and also having a major mental breakdown. Um, and really, that it was shortly after that, really, that my transformation really started to happen.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, that self-esteem is something that, and self-image and loving yourself and all that is something that formed very early on. So when, like for yourself, you've been through a situation when you were very young, it can have quite a lasting impact to you. But obviously, credit to you. You've got through that. You've got through the business situation. And actually, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So you probably are in a very good space now to say, look, I've been through all of this. I've got personal experience of this. I now want to look at helping others. What did you learn along the way then? Is there anything that you read, maybe anything in terms of specifically within your story that helps you change your perception? Is it something that you heard, something that you saw on TV, a friend maybe that said something? Was there anything specifically? Because what I find with myself and clients as well, sometimes it can just be one thing that maybe they've overlooked in the past, but something just twigs for them. Was that the same with yourself as well, Alan?
Definitely. So before I kind of detail what that was, let's just kind of look at where I was. I was in a space where I use the analogy of being in a kind of a pitch black tunnel, not knowing which way is out, even if there is a way out. Right? It was, to use the phrase, it was hopeless, and I didn't want to continue. I also had, like pretty much everyone, I had a complete lack of knowledge of how our brain actually operates, right? And hence why I felt quite hopeless. So what actually happened one day is I'm sitting down in front of the TV, and call it chance, serendipity, or whatever. A program on TV come on called, it's a BBC program actually, called The Truth About Depression. And what that program showed me is that what was going on in my head was very, very real. There was things like my hippocampus would have been probably shrunk by 20%. I would have had various chemical imbalances going on because of like what I'd been through. Yeah, there was really just like this moment where I thought, I'm not just broke. It's not just like imaginary what's going on in my head. There's actually real stuff. And that was the one thing. And the second thing that program showed me is that all of that stuff is reversible, and it actually can be reversed relatively quickly. And that was like, it blew my mind, and at the time, I because of, I don't know, the medication I was on or whatever, I couldn't really read a paragraph in a book without forgetting the sentences that I just read. So I turned to YouTube, and that's where I just started soaking up content about, neuroplasticity, neuroscience, psychology. I just started learning everything I could, even Buddhism, Taoism. I just wanted to learn as much as I could.
So what within there? So we'll break that apart because I think there's two sides to that. We'll start with the latter of those, so Taoism and Buddhism. What was it from those sort of philosophies that resonated with you, and then we'll move on to more of the science-based approach. So obviously you mentioned the neuroscience behind it, and we'll obviously get onto that as well.
Mm-hmm. So up until that point, I would say I kind of didn't have, a slice of spiritualism in me. I'm totally non-religious, and anything to do with spirituality was just not part of my DNA. And I think what books like, Taoism, Buddhism, and everything really kind of opened up to me was this kind of sense of something being beyond myself, like sort of like, whether you want to call it a universal consciousness or whatever. Every kind of religion or whatever has its own kind of take on these things, but it really did open up that there's like there's a connection to something outside of myself. I guess that was the biggest change that made.
Yeah, I think the same. I think there is definitely something out there that we are essentially a part of, and that can be positive for your mental state, isn't it? To realize that and to actually embrace that, as opposed to thinking and being nihilistic in some respects that life is meaningless, and being hedonistic and we can just mess around and do what we want.
Mm.
So okay, that's something you took from the spiritual side. What about the science-based side? What was it that you learned from the neuroscientists and physicists and quantum physicists about the mind and how things work?
Yeah. So I guess there's two pots that I put that into, right? There's the kind of realm of known science and the realm of unknown science, right? And so first of all, what I really learned about from the realm of kind of known science, especially to do with like neuroscience and positive psychology. Let's just drill down into those. So one of the key things that I learned from neuroscience, if you like, is if you imagine our brain is like, say, an operating system, right? That it tells us how to think, feel, and behave, and it even tells how body how to function. That operating system comprises two parts, right? It comprises the actual software, and it also comprises the data. And the hippocampus, for example, is what accesses the data, and if that's not functioning very well, it will pull the wrong data or whatever. And if the software program isn't working very well, that's not good either. So let's make that real, right? Like if we, like for example, in my life, right, I had some data stored away that said the world is against me and all these kinds of things. And I also had a software program that said, if someone looks at you or talks to you in a certain way, then that means that they don't like you, for example. That's just one of millions of computations your brain makes. But that programming and the data can all be remodeled, right? You can start, when something comes forward where you think that person doesn't like me because they've just done this, you can catch yourself and say, hold on, what evidence is there for that? You don't know what's going on in their life. It could be something completely different, right? And by doing that continuously, it basically removes all of that bad data. It removes all of the negative neural pathways that are there, and it replaces them with better ones that are more healthy habits. And if you go onto YouTube, there's even fascinating videos of this process of new, like, brain connections being formed is called neurogenesis, right? And neurogenesis and neuroplasticity happens right up until the day we die, right? The only thing that changes is that the rate of new genesis kind of slows down a bit. So you can actually go on YouTube and actually see this happening under an electron microscope. And when being an engineer, when I start seeing that kind of stuff, it really made the penny drop. You might think, if I've got all these things that are making me feel or think or act a certain way, I can actually reprogram that to do something better. And then there was the field of positive psychology, which, what it really does is it breaks down that our well-being isn't just down to one thing. It's kind of the sum of many things together. So what recent science has worked out is that our well-being is, it requires you to have positive relationships in your life, and that there's biological reasons for that. We regardless of what age we are, we have a need for growth and achievement, right? That's why so many people, let's say, when they retire and they're not growing anymore, they're so unhappy, right? And there's at least 10 of these pillars that all add up to our well-being. And if you can understand what they are and do a self-assessment, you can see where your gaps are and actually focus in on the areas where you're weakest and actually make big improvements in your well-being. And then I guess there's that other pot of the unknown science. There's some just crazy science out there that makes you think, oh my God, there must be more to this world than we can possibly realize. There's quantum entanglement and things like that, which based on all pre-science, it shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. It basically breaks all the rules of the universe, if you like. But it happens, and science can't explain it. And when you start learning about things like that, it opens your mind up to, we as individuals, we are probably more connected to, like, indirectly connected to other people's consciousness and a universal consciousness than many of us actually realize.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, that you've mentioned that you didn't really understand how the mind worked. Then you did your research and realized that it actually functions in a very basic way. So long as you can understand what that way is, you can then program it in a way that's going to be functional for you. And what science
Yeah.
basically does for me is it, via trial and error, works out consistencies. Okay, well, this is gravity, 9.81 Newton meters squared. This is the orbit of the Earth. This is, after trial and error, or equations or whatever, and work out what actually works. But when we don't understand something, it's like what Einstein said, a spooky action from a distance, didn't he, with particle entanglement? And we've just not worked out what it is as yet. But as individuals, you mentioned a couple of things. It's about how we're talking to ourselves, isn't it? We need to have positive self-talk. You look at any athletes, to reach the top, they don't say to themselves, "You're shit," "You're bad. This person's better than you." They say positive things to put themselves in a good mind frame. So I think from that side of things, um, humans, we aim, whatever we think about, we aim at. And if we think we're the best, we're going to aim to become the best. If we think we're low life and the lower rungs of the human experience, we're going to end up like that, aren't we? So I think that's a good thing to do. And then obviously with the particle entanglement and the consciousness, I think it's great to try and be positive and be a positive change in the world, so that, as you said, if it affects everything, it's going to come back to you in a positive way as well. So you've obviously learned all these things across, obviously, your experience. Yeah, you had to come from your childhood. You've gone through that mental health struggle yourself. You learned stuff from the TV, from your own research. You realised what it is that makes up positive mental health. So what are you doing now then to help other people to accelerate their journey, let's say, from where they are, whether it's the 3 out of 10, as you said, up to a 6? How are you helping people to do that?
Well, I guess one of the subtle ways I do that is, whenever I meet with somebody and they mention something, I usually ask them a question that will really make them kind of sit back and think, and go away. And I've often had people come back to me weeks later and said, "Oh, it's like, thanks so much for saying that," and like, for example, I'll say, what is it about your mindset that makes you think that way? And they might say, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, like, you've said what you've just said, but that may not necessarily be true. It may, your mind has said that that's true, but what is it about that? And so that's I tend to do that quite a bit in a nice way, but I really want to help people at scale. And so a few years ago, I set up an impact venture called EverYellow. We've created a mental fitness app that makes it really easy for anyone to work on their mental well-being.
And what's entailed within the app then? So how does the app help people to, as you said, improve their mental well-being?
So so one of the biggest problems with current apps on the market is that there's no real kind of structure to or personalization to how people are kind of being treated, if you like. And the experience is such that people find many apps quite daunting and not a pleasant experience. So most of them are deleted within 2 weeks, right? So an app isn't helping anyone if it's not on their phone. So we wanted to create an app that actually really works and was a real joy to use. So it uses a process called mental conditioning. And so all throughout our lifetime, every experience that we ever had conditioned our mind to think, feel, or behave a certain way. And what our app does is it plays to you a really nice stream of content, narrated content along with music and sound. But that content is completely personalized to you as an individual. So when you first download the app, we ask you a series of questions so that we understand where you're at in terms of like engaging in positive relationships, growth and achievement, meaning and purpose. There's about 10 pillars. Then we download to your phone every week a new set of content. And it really helps people very quickly. And it does that simply by listening.
I like that it's bespoke because there are fundamentals, aren't there, to positive mental health, but it's not necessarily a one size fits all approach because, as you said, where are you starting from and where do you want to get to? I think once you know those things, you can
Exactly
help
right.
people to work out that journey. And yes, as you said, there's fundamentals. If you're going on a journey, there's a left, right, there's an uphill, downhill. But depending on where you are, there might be 7 lefts in a row followed by an uphill. Someone else, it might be 12 rights in a row followed by a downhill. And it's good that you're asking those questions to have that bespoke help that someone needs. What results do you want for people? Is it just to get them from a 4 to a 5, or is it to try and get everyone up to maybe an 8? Because I think 10 is quite difficult, isn't it? If you were explaining 10 as someone
Yeah.
enlightened like a Dalai Lama or maybe a Marcus Aurelius or someone, to get to that level is obviously very very difficult. So what sort of level would you expect people to aim for, if that makes sense?
Um, I kind of relate it similarly to physical fitness in a way. You've got some people that would be happy just being able to run between two lampposts. And you might have others that are happy at, say, running a 5K. And then you've got others that are at the extreme end, right? If I basically have it in my mind that I think getting to a 7, 8 is actually quite achievable for most people. I think once I kind of have this kind of term of like mental shifts, like it doesn't matter how small that mental shift is, once you recognize it, it puts you on a path that's very hard to go back. You kind of sense that you're embarking on a journey which is only kind of going to get better from here. So yeah, I'd like to think that most people could get to 7 or 8 quite easily.
Yeah, I like the word journey used there because, as with anything in life, it's not just a destination; it's the journey that makes us who we are. And I've read a phrase the other day because I'm actually writing a new book about phrases, and it was something along the lines of when you look back, you'll realize that the times of struggle were actually the most beautiful in some respects because that's what
Mm,
shaped you, that's what gave you the growth, and that's what made
yeah.
you who you are today. So, is there
Mm.
any sort of messages that obviously we've not spoken about that you want to get out to people, whether it's to visit the app, whether it's something like a one-liner that you've maybe thought of that you want to utilize, or something that maybe you've got a message to deliver to a specific set of people?
Yeah. So we've had people, for example, one of my early investors was a middle-aged biker dude that basically said, look, I like what you're doing, but I'm just not into that kind of stuff, right? And when the app was ready, he tested the app out of curiosity, wanted to see where his money had gone, probably. Um, and he contacted me a couple of weeks later and said, I got this message on WhatsApp, and I never hear from the guy unless there's a problem or something. And he said, Alan, I want to talk to you about the app. I thought, uh-oh, what is he found some problems? And anyway, he said, look, I'm blown away. Like, I never thought anything like this would be useful for me. I have more energy, and like he does these like evening runs, and he logs his time on Strava, and he said, I'm now running my best times ever, after 2 weeks of using EverYellow. So I think my main message for everyone would be, just have an open mind and give it a go. Like, just say, look, whatever you think of the app, just try it for 10 days and see if that shift happens for you. There's no cost involved. You've literally got nothing to lose. And the other thing is that it's not yet another thing to do. You can if you use a technique called habit stacking, right? That's where you tie a new habit to an existing habit. So let's just say one of your habits is to eat breakfast every morning. Then you can listen to EverYellow at that same time every day so that you don't forget, right? Or I'll use it when I drive to or from work, whatever that thing is. So you can use it when you're doing other things. It's not another thing to do. It's not going to cost you anything. So just download the app and give it a try.
I love that. Killing two birds with one stone essentially, and doing it while you're doing something else. I'm an advocate for that as well. Listen to podcasts when I'm, doing the dishes or out for walking the dog or whatever else. And habit stacking, I love that phrase as well, because I've got well, not a phrase, but I talk about skill stacking quite a lot, where for you to be an individual, you might be the only person who can speak these specific four languages, and you are an IT specialist. So that's a skill stack that gives you a niche to become something individually. I've not really heard of habit stacking before, where you're absolutely right. There is what's the word I'm looking for? It's like if you drink, for example, if you drink too much, you're more likely to then smoke and go out to eat kebabs and come home late. And I can't remember the name of that particular thing, where it's the habit that all the bad habits come from. And the same is for good habits. If you start going to the gym, you're more likely to probably eat healthy and not smoke and things like that.
Exactly.
So I quite like the habit stacking. It probably will come to me in a second as to what that habit thing is called, but if not, it doesn't really matter. So how can people reach out to you if they need to?
Well, if there's any kind of business owners or business leaders here, we do have a really interesting platform that allows them to give EverYellow to their people. If that's something, if you're wanting to front foot well-being in your company, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you want to find more about the app, just go to our website, everyellow.com. If you want to just go ahead and download the app, just go to the App Store and it's there for you. EverYellow, one word.
Perfect. So we'll put that in the descriptions. And the word I was thinking of is keystone, a keystone habit. It's this habit that all
Keystone
the
habits
that comes from. So I think basically as well, what you're saying is that if you were to bring this habit into your life, maybe there is a lot of other positive things that can come from it. Like you said about your biker friend, his Strava time went down because of one habit creates results in other areas too.
Yeah, and if I may, like just because I want to get away from, I want everyone to think or not think, I don't need this, right? It's not about needing something because you're in a bad space. I mean, if you are, then EverYellow can help you. But I've had so many stories from people that said, like, I used it just out of curiosity and I didn't think I needed it, but this is what's happened, right? And one example, there was an entrepreneur contacted me, and he said, look, because you've been talking on LinkedIn, I downloaded the app out of curiosity. And he said, before I use the app, so I've got tons of stuff going on. I would drive home. He's got like a young family. I would drive home. He'd have all this stuff going around in his head. And when he got back to his wife and his young children, he said, I wasn't really present. I was still thinking about all the stuff at work from the day. But he said, as a result, he said, I've been using EverYellow because in that 20 minutes of using EverYellow on the way home, it kind of resets my mind, and I'm now fully present with my wife and my children. So my relationships have got a lot better, and that kind of stuff. So it's not just, that I think that's the biggest thing I want people to get from this, is that it's not about thinking, I don't need this because I don't think I'm mentally unwell or something. It's like, think of it that if you're like 80-90% of the population, you're probably on this mouse wheel where you're just going through the motions every single day. And because the mouse wheel was literally coming down in front of your face, you can't see that there's another way. I like to think that by using EverYellow for a week, it helps you to step off the mouse wheel and actually see that there's actually a lot more horizon out there that you can kind of enrich your life with.
Fantastic. I think it's a great message. It's great what you've done so far, and it's great that you're having positive messages come back, because there's nothing better than you trying to make a change and it's actually affecting real people with real problems in a real life situation. So yeah, thanks very much for coming on the show, Alan. And
it's been a pleasure.
We'll make sure that obviously everyone can get obviously the notes in the podcast description of how to reach out to you, how to download the app, etc. And it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Alan.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you very much.